I didn't actually drink coffee until I was like 27, maybe 26, 27. So when I was a graduate student, presenter mode, fancy. Is there a clicker? There's no clicker. So when I was a grad student, my professor asked me to do this series of transportation planning. So this was actually the first lecture I put together ever. Now, it wasn't this. It's been modified over the last 6 years or whatever, but you had to put together a 2-week module on transportation planning. Okay. So there's a bunch of different areas of transportation, just like I'm sure there's a bunch of different areas of structure. It could be wood or concrete or steel or whatever. Right? Generally, there's transportation materials, which is like asphalt and concrete and the surface you drive on. I don't do anything with that. Okay. Then you have transportation safety, and that's about things getting crashed into. Then you have transportation operations. That's like efficiency and how you make the road more efficient, or how you quantify the operations of the road, whether it's good or bad, or how good or how bad or whatever. And then there's transportation planning. And transportation planning is figuring out, based off what's going on now, what do I need 5 years from now? What do I need 10 years from now? What do I need 20 years from now? Right? Think about how populations grow and move. Right? Who was a kid and grew up in a predominantly rural area outside of a city? Yeah, probably a bunch of you, right? Your parents moved to a place that seemed less populated. There were cow farms and stuff by you, and now it's like a movie theater, right? They fled the city, probably for better school districts, and the threat of not getting hit by a car, for a more rural area, and in that area, probably, right? That is kind of what transportation planners are trying to figure out. Where are people moving? When are they moving? And what systems of transportation do I need to put in place now to accommodate that move? Now, your parents' move was a natural move. They didn't go, oh, well, let's go, we should move over here. It was just, they were naturally pushed to that area because predominantly of economy and transportation. They probably worked in the city and didn't want to live in the city. So they went and they looked around to where can I commute from that will be the best place for my children to grow up. Yes, sir.
Is there anything like the opposite in terms of traffic planning? Like when people are moving away from an area to take away lanes or make roads smaller or something like that?
Yeah, they don't like to do that. So a huge transportation planning case study is the sad fate of Detroit. In the 1960 or something, they did a 50-year transportation plan for Detroit, right? And they said by 2000 there'll be 50 million people living in Detroit. Just based on the trends that are going on now, by 2000 there'll be 50 million people. That never materialized. Why? Because they had a series of miscalculations, right? I guess I would say the crime rates and the businesses all changed. We're making cars is not what we do predominantly anymore. But as transportation planners, they didn't think that far ahead. I mean, how can you, that's why you don't plan for 50 years, but when I was a grad student, they made us read that report. And then everyone had to go up and critique it and why it wasn't so. But people move to different areas for different reasons, but they're predominantly economic. So we try to read the tea leaves and figure out where people are moving. So this is a natural phenomenon that occurs. Transportation infrastructure development is not a natural phenomenon that occurs. If you want to build a new road or you want to expand a road, you need, one, the financial support to do it, and two, the citizens agreeing with this idea, right? Every project has to have a public involvement plan. Like if you do projects for FDOT and you're planning on building a road or enhancing a road or doing something, you have to have a public involvement plan, which means, and it's a huge pain in the butt. But you have to go to the community and you have to have something that's called like an open house. And it's the very early part, and the whole community gets to come in and drink coffee and eat a donut and critique your transportation plan. Like, we're gonna do this. And now these things are virtual. And the things you hear are just wild. Because everyone thinks they're a traffic engineer.
Let's take a bunch of people who are not qualified to make a statement on this and let them make a statement.
Yes, absolutely. And you can't be like, oh, you guys are idiots. Like, every single one of you is more qualified to make a statement about these things than every single person. You guys know the relationship between speed and flow, or flow and density. You know what I mean? You guys have an understanding of the basic physics that results in traffic flow. Right? That was the whole point of last semester. And the idea of this semester is to apply those concepts, apply that physics to some kind of design or something. Right? These people go in there and they make ridiculous statements. And you just feel like, yes, I will consider that. Thank you. Well, FDOT has this really bad problem, though. They do, we need to be recording. Oh, we are recording. All right, sweet. Thanks, sir. FDOT has this really bad problem of doing like 60% of the design. We do 60% of the design and we take it to the public. We say, public, what are your comments? Maybe you should have gone back a couple pages and gone like at like 10%. Be like, hey, what do you think? Well, I don't know how we got sidetracked from this. It's all part of transportation plan. But like, all right, to bring a project to fruition is not a natural occurrence, right? It takes a concerted effort and a huge effort to bring a big project. So if, say, 20 years from now, you as a transportation planner think that some segment of land outside of Daytona is going to start attracting people, right? So you're like, okay, right now, that segment of land is zoned rural, general rural, right? So as transportation planners, we have to work with urban planners. There you go. I swear, it's not until 25 that young men form fully functioning brains. I swear, young ladies, I promise you, it'll happen eventually, but not until they're 25. And they'll just wake up one day and they'll be like, wow, I have a brain. It happened to me. I was 25, I woke up one day and went, wow, that's why I was doing all this stuff. Until then, I just listened to my father. Literally, I promise it will happen eventually. So, it takes a concerted effort to put these projects into place. And I mean, it's a lot of work. But you think this parcel is going to develop, so you want to, make an exit for I-4 to this area. Well, first thing you have to do is you have to go and work with the planners, and you have to go work with the city commission or whatever is in charge of that. the county commission to get it rezoned. Say, look, based off these things, I want to rezone this rural to single-family residential. Right? And that's not too bad of a task, depending, because what they'll do, sneaky little politicians, they'll go, oh, we'll think about that, and then they'll go and buy parcels all around there, and then rezone it, and now all of the rezoning is now zoned, the property value just went up. That's how these people make a bunch of money, which I think is illegal, but I don't know. So, what they'll do now, okay, you gotta rezone, all right, so now we know that this is gonna be a little community. Now you say, okay, this is a little community, and I wanna put in this interchange, right? It takes years and years. The physical construction of an interchange is probably gonna take 2 years anyway, right? So, you have to plan this out. You have to plan it 20 years out, and then you have to plan 5 years out. So, you might have a plan for 20 years, and then you have a different plan for 5 years. It's called the Transportation Improvement Plan, or it's called TIP, right? Transportation Improvement Plan. It's a 5-year plan, and then you have a long-term transportation plan, which is a 20-year plan. So, in the TIP, that is when you start the actual getting the funds together and project building for that interchange, for that area that you want to rezone. 20 years, we just say, yeah, this is probably where things are going. It's not until like 5 years that we have to start doing something about it, as in like, purchasing land to build the road or the interchange or whatever. Yes, sir.
How many years in advance do you rezone an area?
It's a good question. I've never actually rezoned an area. The commission can do it fairly quickly if they all agree. Depends on how often, how long it takes them to get their finance together to buy the other parcels. Sorry. All right, moral question. I'm doing a transportation plan. I'm doing a transportation plan for a company. And that company wants to buy a large plot of land. And I'm going to make recommendations to them about what plot of land to buy. Do I go across the street and buy the plot across the street? There's like, this company has like other companies that kind of follow it around. Right? It's just like, if you have one, you generally get a bunch of other different things around it. And I'm like, well, I recommend, I'll present to the client all the things about the different parcels or whatever that they're looking for, and give them my best guess about where they should put their facility. They get to make their own decision, but I'll just go by the one next to it. Is that wrong?
That's how you look at it.
How are you looking at it?
If you look at it like insider trading and knowing which stock is going to be worth more, but no one else has that information.
No one else has that information. They paid me to find that information.
You are the expert that did the research, so is someone going to blame you for profiting off of that? I don't know.
I mean, I'm profiting off because they're paying me to do the research for them.
I mean, doesn't it just validate your recommendation?
Yeah, it says I got skin in the game, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm so confident this is a good spot. Well, any spot that they would build this thing, it would generate spots around it. You know what I mean? It's going to increase the property value of the area around it.
Well, in that case, it seems kind of irrelevant. Like you just said, no matter where they put it, it's going to generate the area around it.
I just know ahead of time. I know before anybody else. Well, I'm making a recommendation to them.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to act on it.
Yeah.
But they're paying me for information that they're likely going to act on. You know what I mean?
I call you stupid.
Yes, sir.
I think if you own a plot of land before you do the recommendation, then it would seem like the insider trading, because you're actually telling them to purchase that and increase your property value.
Yeah.
But if you purchase the land after, it's just because you made a good evaluation.
But what if I purchase the land after I tell them,
Yeah.
but before they buy theirs?
Still based off your evaluation, but you gave the recommendation without any influence.
Okay, well, who wants to put some money in for a land buy?
It would seem more risky to do it before they buy it, because then there's always like chance that, yeah, they'll always that off chance they might decide to go somewhere else.
However, even if they went someplace else, all the planning work that I'm doing for their project tells me that this area is going to be a hot spot 5 years from now, or 6 years from now, or 10 years from now. They're just paying me to do this resident, this. I don't do real estate, you know what I mean? I'm not a real estate broker, but I do know a good bit about transportation planning. So, that's a good way to make some money. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. Nor have I actually done the work yet. We just got the contract going. Okay. Transportation planning. So, it is a constant. The idea of this discussion, it's a constant struggle, right? You, as a transportation engineer or as a transportation planner, are trying to get these things approved and working with city commissions to say, hey, look, we need an interchange here for something that you think is going to happen, 20 years from now or 5 years from now. And this thing that's occurring is this natural phenomenon that you're trying to keep up with. And that's why transportation infrastructure tends to always be behind, congestion. Congestion is something that occurs naturally. It flows with the economy, right? It's natural population growth, but if you put a new shopping center on a moderately congested corner of a road, you're going to have a lot more congestion during certain times of the day, right? So the idea is that you have to go in way ahead of time and make those corrections so that you don't have those problems. But that's not the way it works. It's just you're constantly trying to catch up to this natural phenomenon because you need to do things like public involvement. Does that not work? Does that not work?
Dr. Clark,
Yes, sir.
so a lot of the stuff we're talking about right now is like foreseeing
Yeah.
what areas may grow and you're gonna build because of that. But is there ever an event where you would build because you want to make a certain area more accessible to people? Like to bring in tourism or something?
Yeah, there's an interplay between urban planning and transportation planning. So urban planning is how you would do kind of that. I want to, say I'm an urban planner and I get hired by Volusia County. Volusia County's like, all right, urban planner, make us a hotter tourist spot than we already are. And you say, well, you would go, develop this area or do this. And a lot of transportation planners kind of dabble in this area. Like, I want my transportation project to revitalize, they say, we're gonna revitalize East ISB and A1A, We're gonna put in a roundabout, or we're gonna put in this, or we're gonna put in that. There is some validity to that. A good example is the Soda Sopa of South Park. Remember South Park Soda Sopa? South Park wanted a Whole Foods, right? The only way to get a Whole Foods is to have this like downtown trendy, thing. It's so they put a bunch of investment into a not so expensive area. They went to the cruddy side of town where Kenny lives, and they bought up all the land around it as the county, and then they tore down all the buildings and put up this trendy kind of like downtown revitalization area. And that's what it is. That's what happens. A group of investors come in, they buy a bunch of low-cost real estate, and they make it trendy and hip and cool, and then they get a Whole Foods. Voila, done, right? I think I don't know if it's the correct term for it, but I think they call it gentrification. And it has a negative connectivity because you're pushing people out of their homes and their communities. And that's why public involvement is also an important thing, because a lot of times people won't even push out of their houses and their communities. And it's not a good thing to do just because this group of investors is going to make a bunch of money, push someone out of a home that they've owned for 50 years. You know what I mean? It's like, that doesn't make it right. And if they use eminent domain to do it, I don't think that's right. I mean, if I offer you a bunch of money for your house, you're probably gonna sell it to me, you know? That's one thing, but to take someone's home and say, hey, this is what it was worth, here you go, that's different. So there are some issues maybe with that. And the idea is to get the community involvement in there so people will just sit and scream at you.
Right.
And as say you are you're transportation, you're not the developer, right? The developer is the one doing the construction. You're just planning the transportation. They will come into your meeting and blame you, right? Because you're the only one holding a public involvement meeting. You know what I mean? They'll go into the city council and they'll blame the city council, which I think they probably rightfully should. I mean, those are elected officials. You're just the engineer hired by FDOT to do the design or whatever. They're like, hey, we need this roundabout for our so pod. We're gonna put the, you know, here's how we access the Whole Foods. So you go, all right, here's our roundabout, and they go, F you, F what you stand for, F everything, you're a bad person. You go, wow. So worse than my teaching evaluations.
The whole time you're just standing there like, I'm just trying to pay off.
Thank you for your comment. Next. Who else has a comment they want to share? Yeah, it's fun. You know, I gotta get this thing to work. Okay. So, the process of defining future policies, goals, and investments and design to prepare for future transportation needs. It doesn't really seem like a great definition. It has the same word in there twice. Process of defining future policies, goals, investments, and design to prepare for future transportation needs. But it gives you the general idea. Okay? So we have transportation planning, right? And now we have transportation forecasting. Now, transportation forecasting is trying to figure out the number of cars that you're going to have in the future, right? The process of estimating the number of vehicles, people that will use a specific transportation facility in the future. Notice the difference. One is future policies, goals, investments for future transportation needs. And transportation forecasting is figuring out how many people, whether they be cars or transit riders or bicyclists, are going to want to use a particular facility, a bus, a bike trail, a road, in the future, right? One is kind of like broad, like, oh, we're looking for, you know, what we want in the future, we're gonna plan 20 years out. The other one is, how many people, how many cars are gonna drive on my road in the not so distant future? And then, what do I have to do to this road? The next logical question is, what do I have to do to this road now to prepare for that, right? Elected officials define policies and goals. Engineers try to estimate their impact, cost, benefit to inform and advise decision makers. I would say that is mostly correct. Elected officials will also ask you to help them shape their goals sometimes. I mean, at least you would want to say the good ones. Right? They want expert opinions to help them shape what we want for the community, what's going to be best for our transportation. So as engineers, especially planners, you work a lot with elected officials, county, districts, and if you look at FDOT, you wouldn't know the head of FDOT? His name is Secretary Tebow. Now, he's kind of unique in the fact that he's an actual PE, but the secretary, the head of the Department of Transportation is actually an appointed official by the governor. It'd be like the Secretary of Transportation. Like, who's the incoming Secretary of Transportation? Pete Buttigieg, right? He's being confirmed to be the head of federal highways, of US DOT. What's his prior experience? He was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. That makes him an expert in transportation. Is he gonna set the policies and goals? I hope not. I would think you'd have like people who are familiar with transportation do that, but I don't know. Who was the previous Secretary of Transportation? Mitch McConnell's wife. It was. Her name is I think Lauren Chow, and her prior claim to fame was, I think, being the Department of Education Secretary under George W. Bush. And I don't know what her prior claim to fame was that. I don't know anything about her outside of that, but I don't know how we got on this topic. I mean, they're like political appointees. They're not necessarily experts in transportation who are kind of in charge of this. Now, I don't know anything about running, you know, a whole sector of government. You know what I mean? So maybe it's more important that you can always hire someone, some idiot who knows a lot about traffic, right? You can hire an idiot who knows a lot about traffic. You know, it's harder to understand the inner workings of a huge government bureaucracy. I don't know. But our current secretary is a PE. I don't exactly know what his PE is in. I assumed it was civil. And there's not a whole, I mean, I guess I don't know anything about mechanical or electrical very much, but when I hear PE, I just assume your background is civil. Because I don't know how many, like, electricals don't need PEs, do they? Mechanicals, I mean, we talk to our mechanical friends and like, licensure?
Depends on what they do, because I know a couple ME guys, and if they do anything that's kind of construction related,
Oh, well, yeah.
yeah, then.
I just assume it's PE is construction related, design related. What about our ME in the back?
I know it's construction, architecture, anything like that, but other than that,
But do you need a PE?
no,
Yeah. You know if electrical needs a PE?
no.
I don't. So when I hear PE, I think civil infrastructure. So the head of FDOT is a guy named Secretary Tebow. He doesn't spell it Tebow though. Spells funky. I don't know, but it's pronounced Tebow, and not like Tebow, but some other funky way with like an H in there or something. You know who would know? Badeiros, because it's like a Boston thing. I'm serious. So okay. Good. Like we said, travel patterns change naturally over time due to like economic development or just natural growth. Right? Economic, a new shopping mall, individual travel patterns. Okay? Individual travel patterns. You guys, what time do you guys, well, I guess we have an early class, but what time do you guys typically get to school?
Depends on the day.
Well, you wake up at like 4:30 in the morning like a psychopath. You get like 4 hours of sleep, hanging upside down like a bat. So, someone who is not well. Daniel,
I live here.
yeah, what time do you usually get up?
For this class?
Not for this class.
I mean, like 11.
Yeah. Students. All right. Tate, what time do you usually get up? Okay, you get up at 9, yeah. Typically. Okay, what time does your regular commuter get up?
6.
If you're in Orlando, then yeah, 6. You know, I typically get going. I get out the door by 8:30, right? So different people at different ages commute differently, right? So the busiest time for our parking lots here, the student parking lots, is what time?
10 a.m.
11-ish, yeah. If you're not here by 11, you're gonna have a hard time finding a spot, right? However, if this was not a school, but this was like a big industrial park, we were oil refiners or whatever, we'd be shift workers, and shift clock would start at 8 a.m. or earlier, 7 a.m. maybe. That parking lot would be full at 7 a.m., you know what I mean? So as populations change over time, their travel patterns change over time, right? Old people, what time do they commute? They don't, right? And not only do they commute less, they take fewer trips. people take fewer trips. So their travel patterns are different. And as people age, this happens and changes naturally, right? If you have a new road, that tends to change people's travel pattern. So if my commute was 35 minutes, and then you give me a new exit, and now I can get off the highway sooner, well, now my commute is 25 minutes. I'm gonna change my pattern to accommodate that. And the same thing with improvements. Added capacity, add the metro. Okay? Have more time with this one. Okay, so how are we gonna predict out into the future, right? We need a way to figure out the number of people who are gonna occupy a facility. I have no idea what time it is, nor do I know what time this class ends. 9:30? Or 9:45?
9:30.
9:30, okay. So we need a way to predict out into the future how many cars are gonna be on this road? How many people are going to be on this bike path? How many people are gonna ride this bus or this train, right? That way we can develop the infrastructure around it. So demand forecasting allows engineers to estimate how many drivers. This goes to calculating how many lanes you'll need for a road to provide an adequate level of service. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, we kind of did that. So these estimates are used to select between a set of alternatives. For example, adding lanes to an existing road to alleviate congestion rather than building a road. So we're trying to predict out into the future what the future needs will be so that we can start building something now to accommodate that. That's the general idea. So we have overall population growth, which leads to population change, right? And then we have the distributions of trips on the road network. So I want to say that Volusia County is going to have a general population growth, right? In general, we just assume Florida has population growth, and that's two things. That's one, Floridians making more Floridians, and Yankees coming down to Florida to live here permanently. I say Yankees, but we get a lot of people moving here, all right? What is the population pattern in New York? People are leaving, right? New York has an older population than Florida, on average. The median age is higher, I believe. And people are leaving New York for places like Florida. Now, the reasons why, I mean, we have nice weather. Like, I was 19 before I ever saw snow. It's a nice place to live, right? Just because of the weather, and there's also tax incentives. So all the states, all 50 states are competing to attract people. They want to attract people because they want to attract tax revenue, right? So Florida doesn't have an income tax. There's no state income tax in Florida. That means if you're Tom Brady and you're looking at a $50 million contract for 1 year's worth of playing football, and you're choosing between the New York Giants or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, well, it's the same $50 million, except there's like a 9% state sales tax if you go to New York, where there's no 9% state sales tax here, so you get to keep $4.5 million more, right? And that's, all the states are trying to kind of do this, to bring in more people. So you have the actual change in population, and then you have, how that population is moving. So you can impact how that population moves through road congestion, right? You're not going to take the more congested road, and through like individual developments, like where you put your stuff, like where you put your road developments. So a new road is constructed, draws drivers from neighboring roads, and that decreases the demand on both routes. That introduces something called Braess paradox. So Braess paradox is this. I have a link of a road, so there's this big network, right? And I have this link, there's this one road, a link, I mean a road, right? And I increase the capacity of this road. What does that do to that road? In the eyes of the drivers who are selecting routes, what does that do to the road? It makes it less congested, which to you as a commuter makes that route more attractive. That route being more attractive, what does that do?
Cause more people to take it and then.
Causes congestion. That's that's the paradox. By making a road more desirable, more people choose to use it. So you're not actually decreasing the congestion on that road, right? Like, okay, say 100 people use this road, and I add another lane and it saves them 10 minutes. I'm saving 1,000 minutes. However, now 50 more cars want to use the road because it's that much more attractive. So, what have I done?
You're only saving like 500 minutes because those 50 extra people have to.
But where are those 50 people coming from?
Other roads.
Other roads. And what are they doing to the other roads? Making them less congested. So you're not saving 1,000 people, or you're not saving 100 people 1,000 minutes. You're actually saving 10,000 people 1 minute. Right? So we, as drivers, as humans in general, are constantly trying to optimize our resource allocation. It's what we do, we're humans. We're constantly making trade-offs and decisions, either consciously or subconsciously, to get the best utility of our resources. One of our most important resources, one of our most absolutely confined resources, is our time. And if I can save myself 2.5 minutes by taking a different route, I will. Right? Unless there's some other reason I have to go on that route, like I had to stop by the dry cleaner or the Publix or whatever. But generally, we're constantly doing this, and we're doing this all the time. Yes, sir?
Have there been any case studies on, like, if this has been affected by the prevalence of, like, GPS devices now, where everyone's checking, like, Google Maps or Waze?
Yeah. There's somebody that does that. It's not me.
Okay, yeah, because I feel like you have the exact same issue where, like, everyone in Google Maps is saying, oh, hey, this route's quicker, and then everyone starts using that, and that causes the exact same problems.
Yeah, that would be interesting. That would be an interesting case study in this, right? So we're constantly trying to optimize our routes and our resource allocation. So if I can say, so I have 2 routes. I have one route that is 5 miles, I have one route that's 7 miles. I will attract the equal and opposite number, not equal and opposite, but I mean, more people will take the shorter route, but it'll become more congested. And then people will take the longer route in a way that the travel time between the two is on average the same. So say we're all of us are on campus, and we're all gonna go to I almost said Whole Foods. The Sam's Club on LPGA. Right? We're all gonna go there right now. Okay? Some of you will come out here to Clyde Morris, go up International Speedway, and take Williams over to LPGA. Some of you will take that same route and take I-95. Some of you might just take Clyde Morris to LPGA and then up, right? There's like 3 different ways we can get there. Now, there's not enough people in this room to impact the traffic pattern, but you can imagine if there were, right? We would all distribute ourselves in such a way that maybe the fastest route, which would be what? ISB to 95? Clyde Morris to LPGA, right? So it's quicker, but it's the shortest. Why is it quicker? There's less congestion. You can go at a higher speed.
They're doing, like this morning, I left the house at 7:20, because I had intentions of getting coffee, and there was so much traffic, like it was ridiculous this morning. I had to go like 5 miles out of the way just to get, without.
Why not get a coffee pot?
Right, okay, well, that's valid.
$20 from Target.
I prefer just a pot of coffee than the individual Keurigs, whatever. So, and I buy the fancy cream. I buy the crappy coffee, but the fancy cream. Yeah, I can't drink my coffee black. And my coffee pot has a pre-timer. And my wife, so like, just imagine like my wife is like opposite brained from me. So like she's like really into detail, and she's like a planner, and you know everything's got to be right. Where I'm just like, let's wing it. Let's go, just take the hill. What's that?
Is she right-handed?
She is.
You're left-handed.
I am.
Yeah.
So she always remembers religiously to fill the coffee pot. Never in a million years would I would have to like set an alarm to remember that. Yeah, I'm like a charge the hill kind of guy. Like, all right, there's a hill, come on guys, just go get it. That's like, it's like what I'm good at. It's like, you know, if you're like given natural talents, it's like that. It's like, who cares if it's like, you know, armed and fortified? Oh, let's go. Come on. We could sit here and do nothing, or we can go take the hill. What are we gonna do? It makes perfect sense. Damn, the torpedo is full speed ahead, right? Where she's like, so I try to surround myself with people who are not like that. If you look at the students that I hire, they're all organizers, planners, you know, not necessarily, they're hill chargers to an extent, but they're like detail focused where I'm not, so I hire them to complement my strengths with theirs. I think that's generally a good idea to do when you start hiring your own people, because eventually, I imagine all of you will go into industry and be successful and have to be in charge. You want to look at people who complement your strengths. I don't need another hill charger because I already have that skill set in my organization. So that's neither here nor there. So Braess paradox, back to the actual point of this class. The idea is that we're all going to leave here. Some of us are going to take some routes, and some of us are going to take other routes. But on a whole, we're all going to get to the store at the same time. Yes?
Does this hold true in like a peak hour situation?
Yes. More so than ever. Right? If you're not dealing with congestion, then generally the shortest path, I say the shortest path, but I really mean the fastest route, right, is going to be the one you take every time. Everyone's going to go to the same route because it's all the same. Now, this only works when you're dealing really with people who are familiar with the community, who drive the network all day, every day, right? And it really only makes sense when you have multiple routes that serve one origin and one destination. Yes?
I was gonna say, when I read it in the notes, I was like, yeah, it makes sense. In my hometown, there's 3 different ways to get somewhere, and all of them are 1 minute off from each other. But there's like a 4-mile difference.
Yeah. It's a phenomenal thing, right? Because it means that we're constantly reevaluating what route to take. But are we? I mean, do you recognize that with your daily commute? I mean, we don't have a whole terrible lot of congestion, at least in the immediate area. I mean, ISB is pretty bad sometimes, but not all the time. But I mean, if you live in Orlando, or if you're from a larger city, you know, you can see that. And at some point, transit enters into the conversation. And I think it's like 40,000 trips per hour. Once you have 40,000 trips per hour between origin and destination, then transit introduces itself as a viable alternative to the daily drive, right? Something like that, 40,000 trips. Because then transit becomes a time competitor against, you know, just driving your car. And also, we have to remember that, for the most part, transit's a pain in the butt. You have to get to the transit stop, you have to get on the transit, at the right time, you had to get there, and then you had to get from the transit stop to your location. Now, if you have a better transit network, that becomes less of a burden. But at some point, other modes of travel come into the conversation and fall directly in line with these decision makings. So we quantify everything in transportation planning as trips. Okay? A trip is just from an origin to a destination. Alright, forecast quantify trips. Trips are broken down for purpose. Right? A work trip is different than a school trip, is different than a shopping trip, is different than a recreational trip. Why is a work trip different than a recreational trip?
Happens at different times and
Happen-
different volumes.
Yes, it happens at different times, right? It goes to different destinations, right? If I'm going on a recreation trip, I'm likely going east to the beach or something, right? If I'm going to a work trip, I'm most likely going north or south. You know what I mean? Just because of the way, Volusia County is set up, I'm likely going north or south. But summertime, everyone's going east because they're trying to get to the beach. And they're going on Saturday and Sunday. They're not going on Monday or Tuesday, right? So we're trying to estimate the number of trips on the road at a particular time. So some of those trips are work trips, some of those trips are school trips, shopping and recreation, right? But, Monday at 8 a.m., the vast majority of those trips are going to be work trips. And they're going a certain place. They're going from, like, the suburb areas where people live to the city district where people work, right? Because we know the reason, it's easier to predict when it happens and in what number. Trips between 9 and 7, 4 and 6, social trips happen later, shopping trips happen on the weekend. Yeah. Oh, this is a good one. All right, without looking on your phone. No one touch their phone. How many gallons of gas are consumed in the U.S. annually? No looking on your phone.
Cars or people?
I'm not drinking gas.
Are we talking like all octane level and diesel, or just regular unleaded?
Diesel's not really gasoline, it's not refined at that point.
You're killing me, Smalls. You're killing me.
You gotta fill in the counts.
You're gonna go ahead and say cars. How many? Just, yes, thank you. What? 50 million. Is this an actual trophy?
I'm not gonna answer for the recollection.
50 million per year. Got another guess?
I'm gonna go ahead and say 400 billion.
400 billion.
Is this price right rules close to that?
That was a good one, Logan. 50 million is definitely not it. I can guarantee that.
Good. How many gallons?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Like, 76.6 billion.
76.6 billion. Virginia? Anybody else? Give me another one. Yes.
500 million?
500 million. Okay. There's two things I want to point out. The fun one is that if we were to ask like 500 people, whether it was how many gallons of gas are used in the country or whatever, or how many jelly beans are in a jar, you can all but guarantee the average is going to be correct. It's wild. Like, you see this on, I think it's like on YouTube or something silly. How many jelly beans are in? Someone's going to say, there's 1 billion jelly beans in it. Someone will go, oh, 4? Right? And then if you do that for enough people, like the wisdom of the crowd converges toward the actual number of jelly beans. It's wild, and you just do the median or whatever, or the average, I don't know. Maybe the median, I think the average might be infected, but I think the median is like very close to the actual number of jelly beans. Right, because I mean, we have 400 billion and 50 million, right? Well, those two cancel out. And then we have 500 million and 76 million, so it's probably somewhere in between there, right? Right. That's the first thing. I like that. That's fun. Unfortunately, it doesn't work in roulette. But it would work in other situations. I mean, gamification of this. Think about that later, how we all be millionaires. The other thing is, what if, instead of just like blindly guessing, we broke it up into like smaller chunks? Yeah? And what if we said, all right, how many, average commuter travels how far every day?
Isn't that something like 50 miles?
Okay. Seems okay. It depends on where you're at, but 50 miles is 25 miles to work and 25 miles away from work. Seems kind of far to me. Right? Okay. My commute's 10 miles or 11. And I got like a 30-minute commute. But I use like surface streets. How long is your average commute? How about this? How long do your parents commute for?
15 minutes.
15 minutes to, 15 minutes from, and an average speed of
45 miles.
Okay, so 45 miles per hour for 30 minutes is 25 miles ish. All right, plus what other trips do they make a day? Maybe Publix here or there, maybe on the 5 miles, so maybe it's 30 miles a day. Average typical commuter, 30 miles a day. All right, what is your typical fuel consumption?
25 to 30 miles per hour.
Okay, so your typical commuter is using what? 1.25 gallons a day? Okay? How many typical commuters do we have in the United States? Well, there's 330 million of us. You could assume typical commuter is, I don't know, 200 million? You got old people, young people, people who don't typically commute. Let's say 200 million.
So you probably make a guess off like on average how many people vote, so yeah, probably 160 to 200 million, something there.
Let's just say 200 million typical kind of commute people. Okay, so now you have 1.25 gallons a day times 200 million times 365 days equals how many? I love John trying to do it in his head. Everyone else just gave up. I got this. 365 times 1.25 times
Like 2.5 times.
times
365 probably.
912,500,000 gallons.
900.
12,500,000.
We're still way out.
I know, it's funny.
Right? But those are just commuters.
Yeah, that's not counting.
Okay. What about
Long haul truckers, shipping,
what's that?
truckers that are shipping.
Okay, truckers and shipping and non-commuters, right?
Military use.
No. Those are all just drops in the bucket. Most gasoline is consumed in your vehicle. But so just shy of 1 billion, we got 76 billion and 500 million. Which do you think is more accurate?
76 billion.
I used to have this worked out in my head where I could like guide the conversation towards the right number. But I forgot to do that. Well, we didn't consider weekends either. So what is the actual answer? 16 billion? I don't really remember.
I don't know if it was 143 million or 143 billion.
Whoa.
Huh.
In 2019, about 143.7 billion gallons.
143.7 billion.
Who's laughing now?
140.
390.9 million gallons per day.
Did we do the math on this right?
That was definitely,
What's that?
I know 365 times 9 or 200 million is not 900 million.
Don't tell Dr. Bell, so you
I
this one.
I'm sorry, what? 1.25
Oh, I only did 2 million, not 200 million.
times 365 times
I'm glad that everyone thought that was possible.
200.
That was actually good.
It's still not close, you know, you do 200 million.
That was good.
91 billion is close.
Oh,
If you got 2 zeros.
my bad.
We said 91.2 billion. Is not that far off. I guess in the grand scheme of things, it is, but you're only off by, 50 billion. You're only off by 50 billion. But these are significantly closer than 400 billion. Yeah. This estimate is much closer than the actual. Yeah? It wasn't 900 million. 91.2 billion is pretty close. Kind of. Relatively speaking. Okay. Why was our estimate better than the other?
Because we started small and scaled up.
We started small and scaled up. And that's what we do with transportation forecasting. Okay? We try to make little estimates about people's behavior, about average people, about typical people. And then we make those little assumptions and then scale up from there to make larger assumptions about where are they going, and how are they getting there, and when are they leaving, and when is congestion going to occur on these links because of they're selecting these routes. So we try to make little decisions, little estimates that are reasonable, that are grounded in science, or I don't want to say common sense, but they're grounded with reasonable assumptions, logical assumptions about what we're going to do. I promise you guys, your mind is going to be blown when you get into the field and realize like 90% of what we do as engineers is just like, yeah, that's reasonable. I'm dead serious. Like, think about, have you guys taken like concrete or steel yet? Think about the safety standards for a concrete beam, right? Think about the live load, dead load calculation. Here's how it works. Okay, the dead load, all right, the weight of the building and everything else, we're going to take that and multiply that by 1.2 because there's less uncertainty around that. And then we're going to take the live loads, the things that like are variable, and we're going to take our best estimate of that, and we're going to multiply that by 1.6. And then we're going to take how strong everything is at, and we're going to multiply that by 0.9. And then we're going to compare it to it. That seems completely reasonable, yeah? Is it really scientific-y? No. But it seems like in most situations, the vast majority of situations, that should be completely fine. Yeah?
Hopefully.
That's what engineering really is. It's using our ideas about science and physics and what we know about the natural environment and being like, that's reasonable, it should be fine. And when you get into the field, probably many of you already seen it in your internships and stuff, you're like, that's how you're doing that? Can you think of a better way? I mean, it seems like totally reasonable to do what we just did. Like, we were talking about using average median income. So we have a bunch of different zones that we're trying to plan out, and we're trying to do it over a series of years to project out where we're going to put this facility. And they're like, we're looking at median incomes. Like, well, we have like 6 zones we're trying to investigate at the same time, so we're going to the median income. Like the median incomes are so off in this area. Like there's like a super nice part by the water that's like very expensive. Then 2 blocks away, it's like dumpy apartments. It's like, how do you combine it? We'll just look at the average median income. Taking an average of a median, how does that work? And statistically, no, it doesn't work. But for the purpose of what we're trying to do, it's completely reasonable to average the medians together to give you an idea how this area is different than this area is different than this area. It's just like, what? Would it get published in a peer-reviewed journal? No, probably not. Although maybe. But it seems like a reasonable way to get an idea of what incomes are doing over time and space. So the answer is 143 billion. We were at 91 billion. Yeah. How many gallons are used by the average person per day? How many gallons of gasoline are used in the U.S.? Scale up for 1 year. How many trips are made daily in Daytona? Well, that's probably a lot. Okay. Was there actual information below that or no? Okay. So, where are we at? Time-wise. Oh, we got 9 minutes. Okay. So, the traditional 4-step transportation planning process. Okay? That's what we're going to spend Thursday, Monday, and probably next Thursday on. Okay? We have trip generation, which is, I have a reason I need to go somewhere. I have to go to work, I have to go to the restaurant, I have to go to school, I have to go to the beach. I have a reason to go someplace. Right? So where am I going to go? I am hungry. So I'm going to go get something to eat. Okay? That is, I've generated a trip. Right? A trip is going to be made to satisfy my want for food. Right? So, now the question is, where am I going to go? Go to a restaurant. Okay? What restaurant? I'm going to go to Caribbean Jack's because it's one of my favorites. You guys been to Caribbean Jack's? Next time your parents come to town, make them take you to Caribbean Jack's. It's a little pricey, but it's in Daytona and it's on beachside. So it's not beachside, it's not on the island. It's on the river. It's not a river, or a coastal waterway. It's brackish water. And it overlooks the harbor. So there's a bunch of boats in there. And most times I'm there, there's dolphins. And they have like live music outside. The gator's okay. They serve gator, which is pretty good. They serve seafood, but they also serve ribs. I like the ribs. So, like I said, it's a little pricier, but it's a good place to get drinks on the water. Good date place. You know,
What's the name again?
Caribbean Jack's.
I didn't hear the first time, I had to clarify.
So I need to go someplace. I'm going to go to Caribbean Jack's. How am I going to get there? I'm going to drive my car. I'm going to take the bus. I'm going to walk. Right? That's the how question. And then once I know how I'm going to get there, I'm going to drive. What route will I take to arrive there? If I were taking a bus, I would take a different route. I would take the bus route. Or riding my bike, I might take a different route. But probably not. So those are the 4 questions. That's the 4-step transportation planning process, right? The generation of a trip, where that trip's going to go, what mode of transportation am I going to take to get there, and then what route am I going to take? Okay? If you look at this type of planning, it is very much linked to the economy. Transportation, in a lot of ways, is synonymous with economy. One of the most I shouldn't say that. To me, as a traffic person, one of the most interesting parts about the pandemic and the lockdown and all of this is the decoupling of transportation and economy, right? We all shut in for however long, right? but we did this telecommuting thing, right? So even though I was in my underwear on the couch, I was still being an economic producer, right? I was still generating economy. Before, I had to generate a trip to generate economy, right? So there were, and they still are very much linked. The more trips you have, the more economy you tend to have, right? And the fewer trips you have, the less economy you tend to have. So, like 2008, you guys were how old? 2008, I was graduating college. The actual number of trips decreased. In 2009, the number of trips decreased, right? That's because fewer people had jobs because of the recession, right? When a recession occurs, we have fewer jobs. During COVID, we had like 60% reductions in traffic from prior year levels all over the country. Just about everywhere we look, we saw it. Thank you, Tate. Tate grabbed all that down. He did like a direct independent study or something over the summer, yeah?
Yes.
Something like that, yeah. So, you know, the economy was down because of COVID, trips were down because they had nowhere to go. There was no trip generation. There was no need to travel. Well, there was a need to travel, but there was no permitted travel, right? So there was no trip generation. So it completely threw a wrench into that relationship. And the future of transportation, long-term transportation, is, are we going to see a continued push towards this telecommuting? And that's a really big question that I don't know the answer. But it's very interesting because, look, if you think about it, say you're a business owner, right? And you're in downtown Manhattan, right? And you have this great big building for all your wonderful employees. And COVID happens and you're forced to go online, right? And I think they're still like locked down. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. But so for months and months and months you're locked down, but you're still being productive. Except you're also still servicing this note on this giant building. And when you own a giant building like that, not only do you have to, or you lease a giant building like that, not only is it a huge expense, it's also like a liability. Slip and falls, people getting hurt, harassment suits for employees being dumb. Like, you put people together in physical space, and it's like, that's a liability, right? I mean, you see it all over the place. You take people out and say, all right, everyone stay in their own house, right? I don't have to pay this note on this building anymore. So I may have lost, say, 20% productivity. I may only be operating at 80% of the productivity I had, but now I don't have to carry the same insurance. I don't have to have this giant building. You know, I gain a lot in not having a physical structure anymore that, you know, maybe I don't need. So that reduces the number of trips. And even if you're like remote halftime, you have, you know, Alpha and Bravo shift. Alpha comes Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Bravo comes Tuesday, Thursday. I can use a smaller building, and we can use, you know, communal spaces or whatever. I don't know. But the idea of that continuing into the future after the pandemic as an alternative to what we've been doing for the last 100 years, I would say since the 1950s, maybe 1950s, post-war. I would say in a post-war era, we've been doing kind of the same thing. And this is a different way of doing it, and it has a profound impact on our transportation needs and planning in the future. Just like we planned for Detroit to have 50 million people, we planned congestion in downtown urban areas to last forever. And that might not be a very good assumption anymore, we don't know. But that's an interesting concept that's emerging. We'll probably talk about that several times because I find it fascinating, and I don't like not knowing answers. I like to look for them. Okay, we will pick up here on Thursday. See you guys later.